Hello, hello. Welcome in, everybody. Come on in, make yourself at home. It's TECC-X. It's our monthly time to be together. We really appreciate you coming back every month. I don't know about you all, but it's season of vacation, and I imagine a lot of you are on it. We're going to record this session, make it available to all. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm subbing in for Josh Simmons. We're both at Prosper Sustainably and support the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative, as well as the Tribal Climate Health Project. I'll be leading us through the beginning portion of this meeting today. All right, let's get into it. So everybody make yourself at home. We would love it if you would introduce yourself over chat. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and then sit back. Don't forget, you will have access to all these slides at the end. We'll send a follow-up email, so don't stress about notes. All right, let's get into the next slide and talk about what we're up to today together. So the purpose of this meeting is to share and learn and discuss important climate and energy related opportunities and issues affecting California tribes. So we have an interesting topic for you today I'm really excited about. So after we go through our general opportunity roundtable, that's the fire hose of opportunities we like to make sure you're aware of around the state. We're going to go ahead and talk about broadband, and we've got some great speakers for you. So you might think, hey, what are you talking about broadband for? I think it's going to make a lot of sense. It's totally related to energy and climate. So we're going to make that connection for you in just a bit. But we do have folks from Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, PUC, and Hoopa. All right, let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, like I said, I'm Angie Hacker. I'm the CEO and Principal Consultant of Prosper Sustainably. Today, we're really leading here from the Tribal Climate Health Project. This is the topic's going to be really focused on how broadband is so critical for tribes as they try to increase their resilience to climate change, but also energy resilience. And I'm here with our friend Shasta Gond, the Executive Director of the Paula Abandoned Mission, Executive Director of the Paula Environmental Department. And I'm going to hand off to her to introduce Tribal Climate Health Project and TECC.
Thanks, Angie, and good morning, everyone. Hope everybody is doing well on what is a nice warm day in San Diego, but it's freezing in my office, hence I am wrapped up in a shawl. But let me tell you a little bit about climate other than the temperature in my office, and that is the Tribal Climate Health Project. We, and by we I mean Angie and me, so Paula and Prosper Sustainably, have been working on this project and standing up our mission to help tribes adapt to and recognize the health impacts of climate change since 2016. So the slide says 9 years. At this point, it's actually closer to 10. And so we can update the impact that we've had in terms of trainings and presentations, recordings that people have seen. We have done a lot in California and also nationwide to help educate tribes and give them the resources that they need to develop vulnerability assessments, climate adaptation plans, and make sure that they are including that important focus on the health of both individuals and their entire communities. And for tribes, of course, that means not just physical health, but also community health, social health, and what are the cultural impacts on tribes, individuals, and communities from climate change. So that's what we do, and that's why we're here today with our first ever TECC-X that is just Tribal Climate Health Project, just the climate side of things and less the energy side of things, but that intersects a little bit too. Let's do the next slide. So when I say it intersects, what I mean is that climate is part of the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative. And if you've been coming to these TECC-X meetings for a while, or if you are one of the member tribes of TECC, then you know that we do a lot of focus on the energy piece of TECC, but the climate piece is just as important. And in both of those things, we are providing capacity building in TA. Many of our member tribes have really benefited from our assistance in helping them figure out what grants to apply for, what kind of strategic planning they might need. And all of that leads into also developing economies and workforces beyond what might be considered sort of typical tribal economic development in hospitality and gaming. We are providing opportunities in the energy and climate spaces through TECC for tribes to expand economic and workforce development. And then I'll say finally, but it's just as important as policy and regulatory advocacy. If you're like me, you get inundated on a daily basis with requests for consultation and comment on policies and statutes and tribal consultation policies. And there's a lot going on, especially in the current federal administration. So TECC provides advocacy in the energy and climate spaces to assist tribes in meeting their goals and advancing their climate, energy, and workforce development needs. So let's go on to the next slide.
Great, thank you, Shasta. So also want to share that TECC has a archive for these meetings and the other statewide offering meetings that we have. We will throw this link in the chat, so just rest assured knowing that all of these meetings are recorded in case you can ever, in case you're ever in a situation where you can't attend live. And then also want to share that we have an events calendar also live on the TECC website, so caltech.org/events. You can see here an offering of webinars, trainings, conferences, etc., specifically for a tribal audience. And if you ever want to submit an event for us to consider adding here, please do so. We can also throw that link for you in the chat. And speaking of events, Angie, here's a list of events to review.
All right. Back, folks. So we're going to go through some opportunities. There's quite a few events coming up. It's really turning into event season. So you may already know about some of these. The first one we want to talk about is the 2026 National Tribal Health Conference. It's on August 17th through the 21st. It's being hosted by the National Indian Health Board. There's also the 2026 Tribal Climate Resilience webinar series on emergency preparedness being offered by the American Indian Higher Education Consortium on August 6th. It's a virtual event. Attracting private capital in Indian country through tax credit financing, session 3. So that looks like another series. That one's on August 9th, brought to you by the Department of Treasury, Office of Tribal and Native Affairs. There's also an annual convening for the Indigenous stewards and cultural practitioners on August 19th through the 21st. That's through the Indigenous Stewardship Network, ISN. And then the 2026 Stakeholder Symposium from the California ISO, so CAISO, Independent Systems Operator. That's an energy-related event on October 5th and 6th. And then the 4th Biennial National Tribal Infrastructure Coordination Conference, also in October, the 5th through the 8th. That one overlapping. Institute from ITEP, those of you that know ITEP. All right, let's continue on. This is a bit of a shameless plug. The Tribal Climate Health Project has our annual summit coming up, our Tribal Climate and Health Adaptation Summit. We've done this for quite a few years now, and the theme that we're going with this year is keeping climate data and strategies current. So if you've done some kind of vulnerability assessment work, you may know that it takes a little bit of work to keep those updated as years go by. We're going to dive in for folks that either have already done a vulnerability assessment or have yet to do an adaptation plan, focusing in on what it takes to really make the next step and make sure those data stay current and you can make progress on your strategies. So that's the theme. It's going to be November 4th. It's an all-day, one-day event at the Paula Casino, Spa, and Resort. And we would love for you to join us. So you can go ahead and use that QR code and there'll be a link in the chat as well. Next slide, please. All right, so this is where we go through a few other opportunities. So we'll go ahead and dive right in. I want to invite folks on the call. We don't catch everything. We're pretty good. But if we miss anything or if there's something you would like to announce, I'd like to invite you in the chat to throw some information in on an event, a funding opportunity, other kinds of assistance to help each other out. That's what this is all about. So we do want to mention a couple of funding opportunities and make sure you're aware. The Tribal Capacity Building Program, TCBP, is actually something some of us work on. There's a round 2 of that program that's really focused on capacity building. The application's really coming due soon. It's August 11th. It's been out for, I don't know, a month and a half or so. It's through Strategic Growth Council, and the funds are aiming to help develop long-term capacity and secure funding and implement tribal-led climate and housing projects. You can get awards. That doesn't sound right. It's Native American tribes and tribally designated housing entities are eligible. The Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Funding Round 2 is also out on the street. So many of us have been looking forward to this. This one is paying for physical improvements and community services to protect Californians vulnerable to extreme heat. There are actually two tracks on this one. So there's one that's sort of an early phase infrastructure, and there's a more advanced phase infrastructure. Awards are $600,000 to $4 million. And again, California Native American tribes and tribal entities are eligible. So that one is through the governor's Land Use and Climate Innovation Office. And those are two really big opportunities. You guys highly recommend looking into those. You have until August 11th for both. Next slide. There's a lot more funding opportunities. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted to put them on the screen for a moment so you can be scanning. These are listed here. You have a deadline for all of these. So it really spans among climate, clean energy, other kinds of funding source, and then we forecast some funding sources on purpose because we want you to have as much of a heads up as possible. These are often challenging applications to get through. So sometimes it helps to get your partners together early. You will have access to all of these, including the links and the follow-up to this email, to this meeting. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, back to you, Serena.
Awesome. And also just want to highlight a couple of tech-supported programs that we're working on the tech team. One is the Access Clean California program. This is to connect income-eligible members of California tribal communities to clean transportation rebates and saving programs. So you can visit this link. We'll throw it in the chat for you, and we can guide you through how to engage in this program and get your community members enrolled. And next, we also are supporting the San Diego Regional Energy Network as an implementer of their Tribal Energy Upgrade San Diego program. And so enrollment is officially open now. So if you are a tech tribe, specifically in San Diego region, one of the 17 federally recognized tribes, you are now able to enroll. So you can actually just contact me directly about this or email our coordinator email to learn more. And back to you, Angie.
All right, that was the fire hose. Like I said, if we missed anything and you know of other stuff, we would love for you to throw it in the chat, make sure we're aware of it. We like to share that information across tribes and tribal serving organizations in California. All right, so we're going to get into the meat of today's conversation. If you've been following us for a while at TECC-X, on the Tribal Climate Health Project side of things, we've been doing a series on tribal climate adaptation through adjacent fields, which is really an acknowledgement that we all want to keep our climate resilience and adaptation work going, even in difficult times, and sometimes through adjacent fields. And in this case, we're talking about infrastructure. This is our second time kind of diving in on infrastructure, I think. And so this time we're going to be talking specifically about broadband. And so for the next 45 minutes or so, that's what we'll do. I'm going to introduce our speakers as we go. And you might be thinking, hey, tell me, why is an energy and climate group talking about broadband? But I will tell you, it comes up all the time with Tribal Climate Health Project. As I am doing specific adaptation plans or looking for information for tribes and looking at their possible climate impact risks, having access to broadband and telecommunication services, especially during disaster, is an enormous thing to consider as you try to prepare your communities for the worst. We also know that a lot of tribal communities around California are in more remote areas that may not even have access to broadband. And so there's an incredible surge of interest in trying to increase and expand the level of broadband service, internet service, and all sorts of good things come along with that, because when you have access to internet, you have better, reliable access to water and power and other kinds of services and systems critical to communities. So it actually became very apparent to me when we were at Paula the other day, right, Shasta? We had an event at the Paula Bena Mission Indians. There was a quickie little fire that started up, and I thought, well, we got a lot of people here. My first thought is I hope we keep access to communication so we make sure we get alerts and can send alerts. And she did. Shasta did. Is there anything you want to say here up at the top, Shasta, on your experience with broadband before we pass over to Matt?
No. I think that's a great introduction. I want to give Matt an opportunity to fill it in because he is the expert. So Matt, it's all you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. So I've been the Director of Technology for Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association for the last 25 years. And in that timeline, I've gotten to be on the Native Nations Broadband Task Force at the FCC. I've been with National Congress of American Indians for 13 years, running Tech and Telecom Subcommittee. Co-founded the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps, which we've reached our 5-year anniversary last month, and have had 100 tribes attend and 500 attendees. And currently I'm on loan to a project where the state of California is building 8,200 miles of fiber optics in areas of California that doesn't have that resource. Sadly, it is not building everywhere. Some of the San Diego specific tribes are not getting access to this network outside their front door. But there is an opportunity to interconnect with that project. And when you do, you get you get access to services there that at no fee. So I'm just gonna do a basic simplification of broadband for folks, and it's about relationships, right? So when you have a relationship, probably the one of the number one components of a relationship is communication between those two parties. Now, those two parties don't have to be two humans. They can be you as an organization and your water monitoring system. They can be you as an organization and your weather station, gathering data on climate. They can be you and your electrical grid. They can be you and your wastewater management system. And so broadband is the network of communication between devices, between people in a community. And the focus, the real focus lately has been tribal digital sovereignty over those assets, over that infrastructure, where the tribe owns and operates the network and manages the communication path of the tribe's data, of all the sovereign information, of all the the metadata that's being collected at different monitoring stations and things like that, to make sure that the tribe has control over that, and it's not ending up in other people's hands for their consumption or use. So we see the need for broadband, just boil it down to kids and education, right? Access to homework after school. Almost every single school in the United States requires you to get online to complete homework assignments. And our native households don't typically have access to broadband in most cases. So as we are building out broadband networks in our communities, these are some of the foundational reasons why. Remote and telehealth is a massive push for broadband at a household. So you have non-ambulatory folks. You have people that can't get up and move around very easy. You have some very easily treatable situations medically that if you had a broadband connection and could do a patient-doctor consult for 5 minutes where they do a checkup, quality of life can be maintained and improved. The getting in a car, traveling 30, 40 minutes to a clinic, sitting in a waiting room, spending 5 minutes with a doctor, turning around and doing the same thing home, utilizing all the resources and assets and paying gas and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can reduce a lot of stress on a person that has a health issue by having a patient-doctor consult over internet. So we really have an opportunity to see broadband change the environment for a lot of folks. You have the telecommuting, working from home. We all got the slap in the face when COVID hit and we all were quarantined to be home. Those that did not have internet connections that were leaving a job, let's say in an adjacent town, provided you had an internet connection, you could continue your work. If you didn't have an internet connection, you were furloughed or laid off or fired because you didn't have the capacity to continue your job. So now, as we move forward, the hybrid scenario of being in the office and working from home is very much embraced because they've proved that the production value of someone at home equals, if not better, outperforms somebody that's in an office space. So, the valuable asset of having somebody to be able to be home for some of the days of the week is a big shift. So as we have broadband to support that, that's massive. With the work that the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps has done in conjunction with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, there's studies that have been done in Indian country that We know that there are 100 tribes that are actively running their own networks or completing a build of their own networks to be run by them currently. We know that there are 50 tribes that have received funding and are in some phase of pre-construction for building out their broadband community networks. And we know that there are 60 tribes that have a plan that are actively seeking funding to be able to fulfill that mission of having their own broadband assets and controlling their own communications. So, rewind to 5 years ago when we started these tribal broadband boot camps, there was still the small handful of tribes that had a network for, maybe a decade prior, and there wasn't really a lot of activity. But as we got into the funding directly to tribes from the federal government, not flying the funds through the state or flying the funds through, a carrier with intent to serve tribes, we finally have some traction on the ground where people are moving and shaking and getting things done. So, there's a number of wonderful examples that you can find through Institute for Local Self-Reliance, so ilsr.org. I'll put it in the chat after I'm done talking. And there's been some studies there, some good examples. The Tribal Broadband Boot Camps is a great place to interact with tribes that are building networks at all levels, just getting started from scratch, for those that also have been running networks for 12 years and more. A great opportunity to interact with folks and build up a host of resources that are based in Indian country and not elsewhere, not in normal commercial society. So there's that opportunity. We have at the National Congress of American Indians, we run all of the policy related to broadband. So currently we are in a fight to try to get a tribal licensing window for spectrum in the upper C-band. And, not to get into details, but it is a swath of spectrum that you can use to transport data with radio frequency that caters to what we call backhaul, which is the large pipe going from your community to the rest of the world's network and moving larger chunks of data. So we're actively pursuing opportunities for tribes to get access to more spectrum, as those of us that have been building networks using wireless technology over the last few decades have realized that there is not enough spectrum allocation for this process. We have, for example, the Tribal Digital Village Network has one tower that's located above the Paula Reservation that uses all the available unlicensed spectrum that's been allocated for people to use. So as we move forward with communications from that location, we can't put anything new up without taking something down, as we would be interfering with ourselves. We've even licensed point-to-point links from that location to be able to reduce interference and then free up some of the unlicensed spectrum. But we still have a scenario where there's not enough tools in the toolbox to be able to pull this off. So we are actively, between the National Congress of American Indians, American Indian Policy Institute, Public Knowledge out of DC, Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and many others, and a lot of individual tribes are participating in an effort to free up some of these resources and creating tribal licensing windows for this tool for deploying broadband. The project that I'm working on with the state of California, working with all 109 tribes, interacting, getting them opportunity and engaging about the middle mile broadband network that's being built. There is a tribal policy that allows tribes, as they interact with the network, to get a host of free services, which are extremely valuable. They are a key piece of the puzzle for running your own broadband infrastructure, and quite a good savings in cost, monthly cost to the tribe in doing so. So if there's any information needed there, I'm happy to step into conversations with folks offline to educate on that process. Like I said, there's 8,200 miles of fiber going through the state. And unfortunately, it's not going everywhere. And we have roughly 24 tribes where that network actually bisects their trust land. We have a number of tribes that are a short distance away, within a mile to 5 miles. And then a lot of tribes, are still 15, 16, 20 miles away. But many tribes are acquiring funding to build the gap. So building their local area network to serve their community, and then also building the middle mile connector piece that gets them back to the network. Um, so I see in the chat there's a question about Starlink connections. There's a host of Starlink connections spread out throughout the region. A lot of individuals have chosen to use Starlink. Starlink is a great, what I call, pothole solution. In the TDV network infrastructure, we've built out as much as we can see from the towers that we have constructed. There may be a household that's behind a ridge line that we don't have line of sight to, and we will not have line of sight to unless we build another $150,000 to $200,000 tower to serve that one household, which is hard to get grant funding for that, and it's hard to come out of pocket for those dollars to serve a single household. So Starlink provides what I call a pothole solution that allows us to get that household that's around that ridge line on the internet, and then can VPN, virtual private network, back into the TDV network or any network that it's adjacent to that it has affiliations with. It is not a be-all, end-all solution for ubiquitous coverage. It has limitations in capacity. For example, the Paula Reservation is roughly 400 homes. You could not hook all of those tribal homes up on Starlink and have a reliable service because they don't have the capacity to serve a dense population, in their grid, their map, which is actually a polygon of like 2.5 miles. They can't serve that many households within that 2.5 mile radius. The technology is expanding. The amount of satellites are being put in the sky is astronomical. They're looking somewhere in the 20,000 units in the sky to be able to serve, but they also have to have a corresponding number of ground units to serve those satellites, which they're building out as well. So it's a great pothole solution. It is sometimes unaffordable for tribal folks, depending on your income level, and whether or not you have disposable income to be able to spend, the price that costs. But it is a solution in some cases. We have a wide variety of solutions being built between wireless and fiber optics to be able to serve communities. And there's a delayed approach to getting fiber back to a bigger network. At some point, they're using wireless backhaul to get to that location as they get permitting and funding to build out that connector to the piece. There's a extreme variety of networks. There is no one size fits all for reservations. Every tribe is dealing with different geography, different limitations with historical preservation, EPA related issues, and things like that. But it is very imperative that these broadband networks are supported and are available, because the number of solutions that can be presented by having these level of communications is exponential. The amount of control you have over your assets, your monitors, your water systems, your wastewater systems, your fire mitigation, and things like that, reduces the number of truck rolls you need, that reduces the amount of staff sometimes that you would need to be able to perform these functions, and really streamlines operations for tribes and makes it easier and affordable for them to be able to do these things. There's a list of some of the broadband resources that are available for tribes. I won't read them all, but you have them there, and you'll get the slide deck after the fact. But there are a number of funds within the state of California. One of them is a Tribal Technical Assistance fund that is available through the CPUC, and I'm sure the CPUC might talk on that as well. But this is a great starting point for tribes to build a broadband plan, feasibility study, to do the things that they need to do to step into this realm. or to enhance what they already have, or to partner with a carrier that may be already delivering service and make it better, or build a relationship with a carrier if the tribe doesn't have the capacity to do that. So I'm going to leave it there, and I think we're gonna go to a few minutes of questions before we move on.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
So Angie is in Starbucks.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. So, all right, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Matt. SCTCA is quite fortunate to have such an expert on hand with Matt, and Matt's one of the co-directors of TECC. So we really appreciate you, Matt, giving us all those resources. I see you tackled one question in the chat already, and thank you so much for these resources. I know you helped us gather those. There is a question for the audience in the chat as well. So anybody's welcome to raise your hand and ask Matt more questions, but I do want to point out the question Shasta dropped in the chat, which is, let us know, how is your tribe's climate resilience affected negatively or positively by broadband access? We'd love to hear how you think these two things intersect. We've seen it live. And then I see a question here from Donna. Hi, Donna. She says, is there a good map of the current deployment of California fiber with California tribal lands?
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat. I'll get the link right now.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And another question. What is the best way for a California tribe to connect with Matt and or his team for consultation or more information about what resources are available for California tribes?
So I can answer that one probably best from my email at Golden State Net. I am putting that in the chat right now. That's my email. Please email me, and I will gladly hop on a meeting with folks to discuss what is available, what's been done by other tribes, process and approach to the problem, how close are you to the resources that exist, a number of different things. So happy to support.
Perfect. Well, we're going to have a little bit more time to chat after the next couple of speakers as well. But Matt, one more question. Did I hear this right? I think folks are maybe learning a lot right now about just how much expansion has happened, how much is still needed, really the coverage. Did you say basically less than a quarter of federally recognized tribes currently have connection and access to broadband?
To their own networks, right? So the FCC projects a number that I don't believe in because a lot of it's based on marketing data from carriers who have been supplying a what if scenario, not an actual delivery scenario for decades. So what we're actually seeing on the ground is different than that. They're projecting something like 40, or I think it's 20% of tribes don't have, or tribal homes don't have access. We think it's more like 40% of tribal homes don't have access to broadband. And then that number that I gave earlier, with 100 networks that are being built or are built, 60 that are in process, and then 50 more that are trying to get funded, that's actual tribal owned and operated networks.
All right. Well, I think this is a critical topic, critical infrastructure, totally climate related. Thanks so much, Matt.
I'm dropping in the chat. Here's the map for the California fiber assets that's being deployed. So
perfect.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. We're going to move to our next speaker, and we're going to stay because on the topic of resources, which is really what TECC-X is a lot about, our next speaker is from the PUC. The PUC helps to regulate telecommunications and has a lot of opportunities coming. And from my perspective, and I'm not a broadband person, a pretty big surge of opportunities really recently. So we're very happy to have Paul Schindler here. He's the Public Utilities Regulatory Analyst with the California Public Utilities Commission in the Communications Division, Broadband Video and Market Branch, where he helps administer the California Advanced Series Fund Regional Broadband Consortium account. So thanks for being with us, Paul. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, hi, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Paul Schindler, and I am regulatory analyst for the CPUC's Communication Division, working on the California Advanced Services Fund, or CASIF for short, consortium account. So thank you all for inviting me to today's TECC-X meeting. I'd like to focus on the new regional tribal consortia opportunity with you all. To begin, the consortia grant supports work that helps move broadband projects towards deployment. So it's not a general climate, energy, or digital equity grant, and it does not directly pay for broadband construction. But with that said, broadband often plays an important role in emergency communications, as Matt said, essential services, and community resilience. So the connection to today's discussion is real, but the work funded under this program that I'd like to talk about is tied to the project, to broadband project development and deployment. Next slide, please. Awesome. So the easiest way to think about the consortia account is that it funds work that often has to happen before a broadband construction project is ready. So that could mean helping a community turn an identified need into a defined project, building the right partners, or bringing the right partners together, filling information gaps, preparing strong applications for a deployment funding. So a community may know that it has a serious broadband program, but it still may need help defining that project, gathering information, coordinating with partners, ISPs, etc., or just preparing a funding application because they can be quite involved. So a consortium can help with that work. So since 2010, regional broadband consortia have assisted communities across California with project development, grant applications, mapping. I know there were some questions on there, outreach and coordination. Specifically, CPUC decision 25-11-003 from this past month in June expands that model to allow for regional tribal consortia that specifically serve California tribes. So it allows consortia to support eligible infrastructure related to work connected to other state and federal broadband programs, so including project deployment, development, and application assistance with programs like Federal Funding Account and BEAD. So something to keep in mind. The program is not intended to replace tribal leadership or make any decisions for the tribes. The goal here really is to help create an additional regional capacity that helps tribes use the service to develop broadband projects or pursue deployment funding. So, okay, we're already on the next slide. Perfect. So yeah, decision 25-11-003 allows for up to 3 regional tribal consortia associated with Northern, Central, and Southern California. So the CPUC itself is not prescribing one organizational model for every region. A proposed consortium can be led by a tribe, a group of tribes, or another qualified organization that has tribal support and relevant experience. So the CPUC will also not organize the consortium, so prospective applicants will need to come together to decide what area they propose to serve, identify who will participate, and develop a shared work plan. They'll also need to develop or to find a fiscal agent. And in plain language, this is the organization that takes responsibility for the financial and administrative side of the grant. So the fiscal agent keeps the records, submits reimbursement requests, and works with the CPU staff on grant compliance. A tribal government can serve in that role, or the applicants can identify another qualified partner that has the necessary capacity. So for this, I want to iterate that tribal support is going to be important. The applicants will need to show which tribes support the proposed consortium and which communities it intends to serve. So one point I want to emphasize again is that participation in the tribal consortium is voluntary. So a tribe does not need to be a part of the consortium to apply independently for another eligible CPUC broadband program. I'm thinking, the infrastructure grant accounts, broadband public housing, CASIF adoption accounts. You don't need to be a part of consortia to apply those, but working with the consortium may help. So again, consortium is intended to provide us an additional resource, not create another gate that the tribes have to go through. So next slide, please. Perfect. So the tribal consortia application window is not open yet, but on July 14th, the CPUC held its first regional tribal consortia workshop in Chico. We received substantial feedback about how the regions should work, how tribal support should be demonstrated, how applicants might organize themselves, and how much time tribe needs to prepare. Shout out to Matt. Thank you for being there and providing lots of feedback. Also, Linnea, you guys are awesome. Thank you for providing that feedback. So definitely being considered. We also heard concerns about grant administration, reimbursement, and making sure that smaller tribes are not left out of the process. These are things that we are considering seriously. So staff is reviewing that feedback, and we continue developing the application materials accordingly. So again, with the CPUC decision 25-1103, this also allows for additional regional workshops before the applications are due if the tribes request them. So with the application process, or when the application process is ready, the CPUC will issue a formal notice explaining when the window will be open. We'll also include information on how to apply, the applicable funding amounts, and the filing deadline. And I think it was Linnea who gave us a good feedback that we should make sure to give a decent amount of time for that. So between the announcement and then the deadline for the applications to come in that is being considered, make sure we accommodate properly. The best places to watch for updates will be the CASF Consortia account webpage, and also signing up for the CASF service list if you haven't already. So yeah, let's see. Before I close, I just want to also mention the California Interactive Broadband Map and its public feedback survey. I know there was a question on there, Matt. Thanks for that link. This is an additional resource, basically for reviewing broadband information across California. So through the survey, tribes and community members can report when the information shown on the map does not match actual local conditions. So there's a little button on the left that says, hey, this is not accurate to my location, please update. And all that feedback gets integrated back into this. So we try to make that as updated as possible. So yeah, basically all the feedback that people can submit on there, especially for places that we might not have as much data for. A lot of it is also ISP self-reported, right? So we do try to verify that individually as well. But want to have an accurate picture of where the broadband service gaps remain. The survey is separate from the tribal consortia application process, but it is a resource that tribal communities can use and share now. So I'll definitely put that in the link in the chat afterwards. So yeah, I guess in closing, the goal really is for the regional tribal consortia framework to help tribes turn identified broadband needs into stronger, more developed projects and applications. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the consortia accounts or the regional consortia processes in the chat. Reference materials. I'll leave this final slide up. It includes the main consortia. Okay, I'm hearing some background. It includes the main consortia account materials and the links for those who want additional information. And as I said, I'll post some more links in the chat after this. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul. If you have an emoji handy, give Paul some claps or something. It's nice to have the PUC here to share that all with us. We do see one quick question you might just quickly handle in the chat before we get to Linnea. Does the PUC have a very rough estimate for when the window will open?
We would like to have the window open by the end of the year. So no promises. This has to go through a decision, which includes a lot of different people. There's going to be comments. But we would like to have it open by the end of the year.
All right. Well, thanks again. And lots of good conversations happening in the chat. Let's continue it. Paul, if you could throw any contact information in there, that we would appreciate it. There's chat on maps and winds and all sorts of things. And part of what we wanted to do today was to bring in somebody that's working inside of a tribe, could tell us a little bit about the experience that they are having. And so we're very fortunate to bring in somebody with a ton of knowledge on this topic. And Linnea, we're just really honored to have you here today to talk a little bit about your experience and what you think tribes should know when it comes to broadband. So I'm going to pass it to Matt first, because you all work together and he recommended you and wants to tell us all about the wonderful things you're doing.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to bring in my friend and peer, Linnea Jackson, who is a shining star in the development of broadband and utilities for her tribe, and kind of setting the standard of excellence on, how to run things and how to navigate this landscape that we're all dealing with. Linnea serves on the Native Nations Communications Task Force at the FCC, has done time with the Indian Land Tenure Act, and is about to host the second Tribal Broadband Boot Camp with my organization. Um, Runs the utilities department for the Hoopa Valley Tribe, and broadband is one of the departments within that, and is an expert in her field and an invaluable resource. I'm just going to turn it over to Linnea to take it on.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Linnea Jackson. I'm a member of the Hoopa Valley Tribe. I've served as the general manager for the Hoopa Valley Tribal Utility for 7 years now. We were established by resolution in 1982, so going on, 44 years. We started off corely serving domestic water services, irrigation, solid waste management, construction of water and septic installation through our Indian Health Service funding. And largely, two of my critical loves have been broadband and energy simultaneously. And you really can't have one or the other. We're also impacted by, climate change. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about those issues and how they're all intertwined and how they are reliant on each other. So again, managing the utility, there's multiple divisions within that. There are a lot of different responsibilities. And when you think about broadband access, I think of coming from a tribal perspective, we rely on spectrum. Matt really highlighted the need for tribes to have access to spectrum over our tribal regions. It's a resource, it's a critical utility, not only for backhaul, but for critical communications. We live in an area where there's high wildfire, and the emergency services rely on that spectrum for critical point-to-point communications for the two-way radios. They're out there fighting fires where areas where cell phone coverage is not available at all times. And if you think about, if there's storm events, if there's wildfire events, they rely on that critical spectrum for communications to deal with issues that come about because of climate change. It could be from drought to severe storms, wind fires, to really heavy snow, and it's all intertwined and interrelated. Another thing is that we are developing critical microgrid projects. We're almost at the precipice of entering into these agreements. We recently were awarded a California Energy Commission long duration energy storage grant. And hand in hand with that, to maximize tax credits, we had to have continuity of construction or the start of construction in 25. So hand in hand with the broadband projects that we're facilitating, we have an NTIA award where we're building fiber to the home, a small data center, 2 communication towers. So we designed our network to set vaults at those future energy locations. So we have those vaults that are specifically ready for that power integration when we're ready for those projects to come to fruition. We've also designed our fiber network to have those additional strands for future service for those locations. And that is going to be critical for the energy management systems, the monitoring of the solar and the battery that goes along with those projects, so we can have instantaneous data transmission. We can see how those systems are operating. And so without that fiber connectivity, you lose a lot of insight in operation of that. Also, some of these projects are going to have, battery and system management. We need to see exactly how these systems are operating. The energy projects go hand in hand with that, and so we're designing for that as well. When you think about climate change, we really have to be mindful of how we're managing critical resources, our watershed. how we're installing and looking to have future water smart technology. So we're also looking for critical locations to where we can have creek monitoring. So you're looking at depth, you're looking at turbidity, and we can have that data transmission. How much flow is actually going out through those systems. So again, it lends itself to have connectivity for that water smart technology and watershed management. It also gives you assets to alert to any alarms that you may have. We have 2 water storage treatment plants, 20 water storage tanks, and miles of water lines. And so we're designing our system for broadband to uplift and provide critical management for those resources. So if we have a water leak, we've actually installed radio read water meters. So instead of our water operators having to read and physically read 1,000 meters every month, we're now using Spectrum, and they can kind of drive by with an antenna and pick up those reads. It also gives data if there's large water loss. And so again, it's critical to management, critical to those resources. We're also build a communication tower in a cultural burn area. So you talk about traditional ecological knowledge. We're working hand in hand with our TIPO officers and our fire departments, so we can provide resiliency, but also allow it to be in regions to where we're managing critical tribal resources, our gathering locations. So when there's a burn, we're prepared for that. We have an off-grid tower to where, there's solar and battery options. And so without the broadband, for multiple reasons for the Hoopa Valley tribe, a lot of this would be harder to manage. We're completing a strategic energy plan as well as climate mitigation and adaptation plan. And all of these things need to be considered. So when we're designing projects, we're looking 5 to 10 years out. What is the tribe going to need? What do we have planned in the future to be able to manage these assets, to do it in a culturally sensitive way, to do it in an environmentally sound way, to keep, our tribal traditions, but also use the technology to manage and to be able to, offset some of these things. And so all of this is in I wish there was a perfect roadmap, right, of how these things are supposed to be laid out. And so we're making those critical decisions so we can build the networks, not only wireless, not only the spectrum for critical communications, for our police and fire and our ambulance and our school buses, but also to plan for that future so we can build energy resiliency. The Hoopa 1101 circuit is in one of PG&E's 1% top or least we're performing circuits in the region. So we are having to look at how we're uplifting the grid, how we're installing that communication, and that goes hand in hand with data and broadband transmission. I know I only had 5 minutes to kind of talk about these things, but I wanted to say these go hand in hand. It's critical for tribes to have access to funding for spectrum and opportunities in those windows, funding for energy resiliency, because we're the ones that are providing the solutions to be able to secure these things for our people for generations to come. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Hoopa and a lot of tribes are doing throughout the region to pair broadband energy to mitigate some of the climate impacts that we're all experiencing, and to do it in a traditional and mindful way of protection of resources. So it's kind of a perfect balance there of all of those different things. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know I only had 5 minutes, but I wanted to touch upon the things that are possible with connectivity, utilities, and tribal nations.
Angie, I'm just going to jump right in. And Linnea, it's great to meet you. I was the TIPO at Paula for many years, and now that title is held by one of our tribal members, John Pepper, which is great. But I know Kaduscha and have worked with her a lot, and very envious of the beauty of your area. So I'm just imagining being in the Redwoods right now. But I do have a question for either you or Matt or Paul, any of them. And I'm thinking about the small tribes that don't have access right now to broadband. can you point out any barriers that immediately come to mind that people should know about from the beginning, things that you had to overcome, and that they should be aware of as they start this journey towards getting connected?
I can jump in and then the others can chime in. For one, if you think about the smaller tribes, right, it always comes down to a capacity issue. It's definitely not our ability or need, but it's a capacity issue. It's, you know, it's the grant writing. It's, you know, having a team to be able to submit for the applications and be able to apply within that window. You know, do they want to build and own themselves, or do they want to work with an incumbent? So there's a lot of different decisions that have to happen up front in order for tribes to decide how they want to facilitate broadband access. But in my mind, it comes down to a capacity issue, whether that's grant writing, whether that's the fiscal responsibility of managing that and sometimes fronting the money on top of that. That's always a burden. Staff training and having the workforce for internal training, which is one of the great reasons why the TBBs are so important. And so there's a lot of capacity issues needed for tribes where they absolutely need the support for design, environmental, grant writing capabilities.
Yeah, thanks, Linnea. Perfect. And just to add a bit, there's a number of, you know, little metrics, little questions that can be answered that will really kind of indicate which way is probably the best pathway for the smaller tribes. A lot of times they don't have the human capacity to be able to manage it in-house. So there are some very successful partnerships between tribes and carriers of a sort of mid-tier level. There's currently one being developed right now that I'm participating in. It's actually very functional. There's only 50 tribal buildings that are being connected, and that we're devising a solution that allows them to own and operate that network, but also partner with who's building it. So, but retain the asset. So there's a number of goals that we're all interested in, and that is the tribe owning the assets on their tribal land so that they can make educated decisions and partner with people and unplug one carrier and plug in another one if they're not behaving correctly or no longer you know, affordable or whatever the case. So there are a number of things we can do to support tribes in making those decisions. But you know, there are some decisions to make, and there's a few dollars to spend. So you know, the CPUC does have some really key grant opportunities for California tribes. Like I mentioned before, the Tribal Technical Assistance Grant is a major decision maker funder. So it funds an expert external to come in and do a feasibility study, write a broadband plan, and map out what it would cost in the future. So it's a good time to figure that out.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, Angie, we got 2 minutes, so it's back to you.
Yes, well, you're getting accolades here in the chat, speakers. So let's give our speakers another virtual round of applause. Thanks so much for everybody for being here today. I'm sure there's more to say, and it's great to bring the attention on this really important issue to tribes. And I'm sure there's more that we would like to interact with the PUC on. So more to come. So one more thing we want to do today before we close out, and that's just help us make this series better. We've been at this actually for a few years. We took a little break, but we want to make sure that this is as valuable as possible, specifically for tribal serving practitioners around the state. So we would love it if you would use this QR code. There's probably also a link in the chat for folks who would like to just share their input that way. And just tell us how we could do an even better job. Hopefully my background noise wasn't too distracting today, but hey, on a broadband call, at least our internet worked out pretty well. So anyways, folks, that's going to be it for us today. Thanks again to Linnea, Matthew, and Paul for their great knowledge and expertise. We'll see you back here next month for another TECC-X. So we'll see you then.
Everybody.